It's me, Egbert, once again. I'm the new owner of this station. I went out and hired the best talk radio consultant, Jeff Allen from News Talk STL, and told him to hire the worst talent he could find. Jeff did exactly as I told him. Ladies and gentlemen, here are Brad and John.
And by the way, I haven't mentioned this so far today. We do this show live. It is broadcast live between 7 and 8 o'clock Central Time every day, Monday through Friday. And you can listen to the show. You can stream it. If you're in the area, you can listen to it on 104.5 when the router is working right, which right now at this very moment it's not, which is very frustrating. But anyway, you can listen to it live 7 to 8 o'clock. And then, of course, we put it on the podcast. And it's also on our YouTube channel. You can go directly to the YouTube channel by going to bjshow.video. John, are you ready for our phone call here?
Absolutely, of course. Well, I mean, I can't interact with the guests, but I'm happy to listen.
Okay, we'll see what happens here if I blew up the equipment. Hopefully it'll work.
Hello.
Good morning, Brooke. How you doing?
Hey, good. Good morning. How are you?
I'm running a little bit late, and I apologize.
No problem.
Okay, once again, I think I told you this last night. We have a technical issue here, and I have an even more pressing technical issue here that I spilled my soda this morning into some of the equipment. And part of the soda spill is in the piece of equipment you're on, so hopefully we'll get through this interview and there won't be any flames come out of this piece of equipment, and we'll have a nice conversation. How's that?
Okay.
Okay, first off, John Combest, who can't talk, but he can hear you, he told me the other Brooke Foster runs the Show Me Alternatives. He's not exactly sure if that's an actual pot store or a group, but have you ever heard of that lady, Brooke, the other Brooke Foster?
No, I have not heard of her or the place, so that's intriguing. I'll have to look it up.
Okay, now here is in full 100% disclosure here. I heard you Monday afternoon on Mark Reardon's show in a 97-1, and I thought you did an excellent job. And your organization you represent is, what's the name of the organization again?
So our committee is the Missourians Against the Deceptive Online Gambling Amendment. So we're formed in opposition to Amendment 2.
Now, the interesting part of it is that you are not necessarily against gambling, correct?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. We are not opposed to sports betting coming to Missouri. We fully acknowledge that it exists on, both sides of our borders. We are just very, disappointed by the way this measure was written, and the way it's subsequently been advertised. We think it's very disingenuous, especially with the claims that it's making for education funding.
Okay, we'll get into that for a minute. Now, that was question number one that John asked me, and he always has good questions. Question number two is, what is it specifically about the amendment, and what would you do to change it?
Sure. So specifically, it is the fact that, the commitment to education funding is overblown. But I think one of the first things that we would do or, recommend be done in the future is putting what's called a non-supplant clause into the language. So one of the big issues that we have, Brad, with Amendment 2 is that there's absolutely no guarantee that even if money is raised, then it will go to education, because the folks who crafted that language, who are, the online sports betting companies, they left that clause out. So basically, we've seen it before with the lottery. We've seen it with the casino issue in 2008. The money can just be moved around because it can be shifted into the general fund and used for other projects. So that's the main thing that we would like to see, is that non-supplant language that would guarantee money is funneled directly to education.
Now, that is Brooke Foster you're listening to. And once again, she's giving us her viewpoint, her group's viewpoint on why the constitutional amendment, which are going to appear on the ballot, essentially what? 5 weeks from today? 5 weeks from yesterday.
It's 5 weeks from yesterday. Yeah, it is coming up.
Okay, now, the interesting thing is, you mentioned a couple things on the show. I'm driving down a highway and I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, you mentioned at one point in time that the way this is crafted, that there could be very little or no money going to the state. Explain that.
Sure. So the reason for that is that basically the online gaming companies who wrote this measure, DraftKings and Fan Duel, they are allowed to take a lot of deductions. So the first thing that they can deduct is any promotional credits or free play. So if someone is, gambling online, doing sports betting, they can be enticed to keep gambling by being given basically $100 in free money. Completely legal, happens all the time. But that $100 then can be deducted, from the tax revenue that DraftKings and Fan Duel would owe. So if you can imagine, $100 is not a big deal, but $100 multiplied by, thousands of people placing bets online, that's a huge chunk of money. So after that's deducted, they can then deduct any federal tax that they pay. And after that, they need to pay into the Problem Gambling Fund in Missouri, and then they pay education. So education is the very, very, very last stop on that timeline. And if there's any money left, that's what they would give to the state. So we're very, very skeptical of them, really putting anything beyond pennies into our state.
Okay, let's look at this from a simple accounting standpoint. I'm not the world's greatest accountant, but being in business, you have to know these things. Top line number would be, if you're looking at this like on a balance sheet, top line number would be the total amount of revenue that's generated by the gambling in the state of Missouri, correct?
Correct.
And then the middle line, that would essentially be revenue or income. Then our expense line would be what the gambling companies are writing off. And if when it comes down to the bottom line, they could essentially manipulate the numbers to the point where when the bottom line comes down, it shows that they have, let's say, $100 million worth of income and $99 million worth of expenses, and there's only $1 million in revenue, and the state gets $4.52. Is that essentially what you're saying?
That's absolutely what I'm saying, and it's completely legal. I mean, it's something that they can do via, some creative accounting that is legal. And, we've seen it happen in Kansas. Brad, they approved sports gambling in 2022. And so the first opportunity for a really big, betting event was when the Chiefs went to the Super Bowl in 22. So Kansans bet $194 million online, during the Super Bowl. So $194 million, and that sounds like the state should have gotten a lot of money. Well, the state got right around $1,100, so $1,100
Whoa.
off of nearly $200 million in bets.
Hold on a minute.
And it's legal.
For real? Off of $200 million, the state got $1,100?
Yes, because they were able to take all of the sort of deductions, that you and I are talking about. And in Missouri, it would be even worse because in Kansas, they can only take 10% of those kind of promotional credits. That's where the cap is. They can't just take all of it. In Missouri, it's capped at 25%, but they're projected to bring in about $3 billion. So as you can imagine, I mean, it's just the reality is these folks are going to owe nothing to the state. And yet the proponents of Amendment 2 are putting teachers on camera, saying things like they would receive raises. And listen, I've got 2 kids in, public elementary school in St. Louis, Missouri. I would love for our teachers to make more money and for, students to have, just more. But that's not what this amendment will do. This is a sports gambling amendment, not an education funding amendment.
Okay, now maybe this is off the beaten track in asking you this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask this anyway. We recently had, just this week, we had Pete Rose who died. And Pete Rose was banned from baseball because of the fact that he bet on baseball. And it used to be the teams, all the sports teams, all of the teams, the major, MLB, NHL, all NBA, the whole bit, they had an absolute positive. Gambling's evil, gambling's terrible, gambling's no good. I was listening to the Chiefs game, not this week, but the week before last, and there's an ad running for pro this amendment, and it's saying, and all the Missouri teams endorsed it. The Rams, the Chiefs, the Kansas City Royals, the St. Louis Cardinals, the Blues. Why is it that the athletic teams have done this 180? What's the deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting aspect of it. And, I can't really, speak to it with any authority, so it's not really the purview of our campaign. But, I mean, I think that values around sports gambling have shifted now that it's seen more of a business, right? So, Pete Rose came under a lot of fire because what he was doing was, correctly seen as ethically wrong. But now that this is legalized, it's become less of a moral issue and more of a business issue. So, I mean, I understand and I don't have a problem with professional sports teams trying to make the best financial decision for them. But I do have a problem with, them doing things like having their mascots show up on, the day the signatures were filed and making it a very sort of like kid-friendly type initiative. I just think there's a lot being done by the proponents of this initiative to sell this to Missourians. And I think that's because they know that the truth of it is, if they told the truth about the fact that, we might get $0, this really isn't any sort of net positive to the state, it would be much less appealing.
Which begs the question: what do the teams get out of this? Do they get a revenue share out of this? Do the Cardinals get a percentage of why are they for it all of a sudden?
That's my understanding, but again, that's kind of outside of what we're doing. But yes, that is my understanding. They do get a percentage, and just that it, also just drives more interest in the games. Going to them, watching them on television. People. We've seen people get very, very invested in, all the minutia of games because you could bet on pretty much any action or activity that occurs during it. So, I think it's both. I think it's revenue and just, getting people in the seats or, paying for whatever it might be, the MLB channel, things like that. That would be my guess. And again, it's all super legal.
But is there any specific money that they would get from this amendment? In other words, supposedly the state's supposed to get money for education. Do the Cardinals get a piece of it? Is that written in the legislation? Or is it just to the point where they get the ancillary benefits of, oh, wow, I'm going to watch the Cardinals because I got money on them tonight, that kind of a deal? Yeah,
my understanding is that it's primarily ancillary benefit. But I would have to look at all, line by line and see if that's in there. There's nothing in the bottom line funding about anything going, anywhere else besides the general revenue.
Okay, now here's my nosy question. Well, not nearly a nosy question, nosy statement. In that you and I talked about this yesterday when you called me back last night. This is not necessarily along political lines, because you told me your political viewpoints are essentially you're a progressive, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
In other words, you're not some, and don't take this the wrong way, maybe John will take this the wrong way, you're not some crazy conservatives going like, we don't need another sin, gambling's a sin, we don't need that. That's not where you're coming from. You're just essentially saying this is smoke and mirrors and it should not be done this way. And do I have sort of that summarized? Is that good?
Absolutely. I personally don't have an ethical opposition to gambling. And like I said, it already exists in so many other states that I completely understand, Missouri's desire to also have this. But I think that the support that we have is bipartisan and doesn't fall along lines because, while there are folks, and I completely respect the position that think that gambling is wrong and shouldn't exist, there's a lot more folks who are just tired of lies being told and, kids and teachers being used as props in advertisements. It's just, they've got these retired teachers on camera who are essentially being told to tell very, very exaggerated versions of the truth, I'll say, if not outright lies about, tens of millions of dollars going to schools. Well, see, to me, that is just so disingenuous.
John and I couldn't agree with you more. John and I have this running joke that, as a matter of fact, I say, hey, let's legalize prostitution. And John came up with the campaign, Escorts for Education. And, I could come on, hi, I'm Jim Smith. And you know what? If you approve prostitution in the state of Missouri, our schools will benefit. How about cocaine for education or meth for education? And that's to me.
Absolutely.
And you and I are on the same page in that concern then, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think education has been used as, this pawn for decades. I think it's something that, because it's so universally treasured as it should be, any sort of issue, especially if it's an issue that might be a little bit controversial or contentious, if you can somehow attach teachers and schools and kids to it, that makes it more palatable. So, for me, unfortunately, whenever I see XYZ for education, that's a measure I want to look to, more closely, because so often it just does not bear out.
Because it's like saying, oh, look at my cute puppy, vote for my puppy. And it turns out it's a Rottweiler kind of thing, like that, maybe?
Absolutely. Yeah. Who's going to say no to giving money to kids? And, and again, just as a Missourian and as a mom, I find I find that pretty distasteful, to make kids and teachers the face of a sports gambling initiative, a business initiative.
Interesting. Brooke Foster, I appreciate your time this morning. If
Hey, Brad?
Brad. Yeah, John.
Brad?
John's talking to me. Yeah, go ahead.
So if Missouri voters reject sports betting, should we anticipate the legislature takes action next year? And what makes us think that the legislature will actually pass a sports betting bill?
You probably didn't hear him. He said if they reject, if this gets rejected this year, will the Missouri legislature take action on this next year? And do you think anything will happen with it?
I don't know. And that's kind of beyond, I don't want to sort of hazard a guess on that. I think maybe, even though it obviously has not had success, I think there's also a possibility that if this does fail, it would be another initiative petition, basically rewritten with more fail-safes. So I don't know, but our hope is that this will fail, and then it'll be sort of demonstrative as to, why it did fail, and that we need to actually put some safeguards in there for education, is my guess. But yeah, they have so much to do in Jeff City this next session that I don't know if this is going to be a priority.
Brooke, if people want more information, is there a website people can take a look at what you people are talking about?
There absolutely is. So it's just noamendment2.com. So noamendment2.com, and that has all of the facts about our initiative. It has a place where folks can sign up to be part of our coalition or just stay in touch and get more information.
Brooke, you've been a great spokesperson. I appreciate it. You've answered all my questions. I almost feel like we've had a good debate as opposed to the presidential debates where none of the questions get answered, right?
Right, exactly. No, I really, really appreciate the questions, Brad, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Brooke.
All right, thank you. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
What do you think, John?
It was a nice conversation. I look forward to hearing what Jack Cardetti has to say. Look, Brooke is very talented, and I think she does, a good job. You and I both agree that her performance on Reardon's show was really good. We both listened to it.
Well, she, here's the interesting thing. You ask her a question, she gives you an answer, right? I mean,
yeah. Hey, that's all you can ask for. And I think that, Brad, if you were cynical, you would say that I think that the no side's argument to this is let's kill this and hope that the legislature does something next year. And if they don't, maybe voters could approve it in 2026, which means that sports bettors would need to wait until, 2027 to get the opportunity to bet on sports.
See, once again, I know you get tired of me rehashing things, but I'm a young guy. I'm in high school. And somebody comes into my classroom, they're a futurist, and they're walking to my classroom, and I'm this young guy back in high school, and the guy says, you know what? There's all sorts of changes ahead right here in Missouri. First off, we're going to have the lottery. Then we're going to have casinos. And then we're going to have sports gaming. And I go like, okay, this guy, what planet is this guy from? This is Missouri. None of that's never going to happen. You know what I'm saying?
Well, he would have mentioned that you could just go down to the local dispensary and smoke your troubles away.
Right. Okay, we have to take a break. We will be back.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?